I had just finished washing the dust off my Jeep when Karen stormed across the cul-de-sac like she owned every square inch of pavement in our neighborhood. Her sandals slapped against the concrete with the rhythm of an executioner's drum. Before she even opened her mouth, I could already predict the script: the HOA's favorite song, some fresh complaint about my Jeep, and an ultimatum that I should do the right thing and sell it to her son who, in her words, deserved it more. "Are you still refusing to sell that rust bucket?" she demanded, glaring at the Jeep as though it had personally insulted her. The irony was rich. The Jeep was immaculate, detailed, and well-maintained, an essential tool for my job. But to Karen, it was just another toy she believed she could snatch with the authority of a schoolyard bully. I gave her my usual calm smirk. "Still refusing. But thanks for your continued interest." She gasped as if I'd cursed her name. "You think this is funny? My son needs a vehicle, and that hunk of metal is just wasting away in your driveway. It's a community eyesore. If you've never encountered someone like Karen, let me paint the picture. She thrives on the illusion of control. Every car parked on the street, every flower planted in a yard, every shade of house paint, she sees them as chess pieces she's entitled to move. Denying her is not just a refusal. To her, it's a declaration of war." I leaned against the Jeep, arms crossed. "Karen, the Jeep isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. I need it for work." "Work?" she sneered, eyes narrowing. "You shuffle papers somewhere downtown. Don't act like you're some sort of action hero." That made me laugh, though I kept it quiet. I hadn't told anyone in this neighborhood that I was a federal park ranger. Not just the type who sits at a desk stamping permits, but the kind who patrols thousands of acres of national land, coordinates rescue missions, and sometimes deals with people who think federal law doesn't apply to them. The Jeep wasn't just transportation, it was my lifeline in rough terrain. But to Karen, it was just an inconvenience to her son's pride. She pulled out her phone and started recording, angling it toward my face. "This is harassment," she announced loudly, her voice projecting as if she were auditioning for a role. "This man is threatening me. This man is endangering the community with his junk car." I raised an eyebrow, deadpan. "Karen, you walked over here. Don't you talk back to me," she snapped. "I'll call the cops if you don't hand over the keys. Right here, right now." I stared at her in stunned amusement. "You're threatening to call the police, because I won't sell you my Jeep?" Her chin jutted forward. "You'll see. The law is on my side. You can't just hoard resources when others need them more. This neighborhood is about sharing." Sharing, in Karen's dictionary, meant taking. When I didn't flinch, she dialed 911 right there in my driveway, raising her voice so the entire block could hear. "Yes, officer? I'd like to report a hostile neighbor refusing to comply with the HOA. He's keeping an unsafe, illegal vehicle, and he just threatened me." Across the street, blinds shifted as neighbors peeked out. A couple of kids riding scooters slowed down to watch. Karen was staging a show, and she wanted an audience. I could have stopped her, corrected her, reminded her that the Jeep was fully legal and registered. But instead, I folded my arms tighter and let her play her hand. Sometimes the best way to win isn't to argue. It's to let someone dig their own hole until they can't climb out. 15 minutes later, a patrol car rolled into the cul-de-sac. Karen waved it down like a shipwreck survivor spotting a rescue boat. "Officer! Over here!" she shouted, pointing at me. "That man is the problem. He's got an illegal vehicle, he threatened me, and he's refusing to comply with community rules." The officer stepped out, calm and measured, but you could see in his eyes that he'd heard this type of voice before. The shrill, performative entitlement that made every call seem like a reality show audition. "Sir," the officer addressed me politely, "is this your vehicle?" "Yes, officer," I replied evenly. "It's mine. Registered, insured, and road legal." "That's not true." Karen cut in, practically foaming at the mouth. "It's military grade. It's a hazard. He's a menace." The officer glanced at her, then back at me. Do you have proof of ownership? Without breaking eye contact with Karen, I pulled the registration from my back pocket and handed it over. The officer took one look, nodded, and handed it back. It's all in order, he said. There's no violation here. Karen's jaw dropped. What? No. You have to tow it. The HOA has rules. Ma'am, the officer interrupted, firm now. HOA rules aren't enforceable by police unless they overlap with state or federal law. And this Jeep is perfectly legal. Karen's face turned crimson, her voice rising to a near scream. Then arrest him for threatening me. He glared at me aggressively. He leaned against that Jeep like he was intimidating me. The officer sighed, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Ma'am, standing near your own car isn't a crime. Neighbors chuckled from behind their windows, and I could see Karen catching on that the sympathy vote wasn't going her way. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. She turned to the officer with a final, desperate plea. Don't you see? He doesn't even have a real job. He's a nobody. My son is a veteran, he deserves that Jeep. This man should be forced to give it up. He's nothing but. That was when I finally spoke, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through her tantrum. Karen, before you embarrass yourself any further, maybe ask the officer here to run my credentials. My work ID is in my wallet. You might find out I'm not exactly the neighbor you think I am. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. Karen's face flickered with sudden uncertainty. For the first time that day, she hesitated. I took out my leather badge holder, flipped it open, and held it out. The gold glint of my Federal Ranger credentials caught the sunlight. The officer took a slow step back, clearly surprised. You're with the Park Service? Federal Law Enforcement Branch, I confirmed, tucking it away again. Which means, Karen, you didn't just lie to the cops about your neighbor. You lied to a federal officer. That's a whole different ballgame. Karen's expression collapsed like wet cardboard. The officer's tone shifted immediately, all professional courtesy directed at me, while Karen sputtered in disbelief. And that was only the beginning. The police cruiser had barely turned the corner when Karen whirled on me with the fury of a woman whose entire empire had just been reduced to rubble in front of an audience. Her lips trembled, her hands shook, and her voice came out in high-pitched shards of outrage. You tricked me, she spat, pointing at the Jeep as though it were an accomplice in some grand conspiracy. You lied about who you are. You've been hiding, keeping secrets from the community. I leaned against the Jeep again, calm as ever, and gave her a thin smile. I didn't lie. I just never told you. There's a difference. Her chest heaved. Do you realize what you've done to me? The entire neighborhood just saw you humiliate me in front of the police. You've made me look like a fool. You didn't need my help for that, I replied. You did just fine on your own. Her shriek could have shattered glass. She stormed back to her house, slamming the door so hard it rattled. Curtains twitched across the cul-de-sac. Everyone had seen the scene play out like the finale of a soap opera. I could feel their curiosity radiating from the shadows. What Karen didn't realize was that public humiliation wasn't the worst of what she had just triggered. Because people like her never stop at a single defeat. The next morning, as I was loading gear into the Jeep for a field inspection, I saw her again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 other HOA board members. Tom, the self-important treasurer with a golf cart obsession, and Sandra, the secretary who wielded clipboards like medieval weapons, were flanking her on the sidewalk. They marched toward me with a grim determination, as though they were walking into a courtroom. Mr. Ranger, Tom began, using my title like a slur. The HOA has reviewed the situation, and we've come to a decision. I didn't even pause in my loading. Oh, this should be good. Sandra cleared her throat, flipping through her paperwork with theatrical precision. Due to your failure to comply with community harmony standards, the HOA has voted to fine you $200 per week until that Jeep is removed from your property. Karen's smile was back now, wide and vindictive. You may have tricked the cops, but you can't ignore the HOA. We have authority here. I shut the Jeep's rear hatch slowly, deliberately. Then I faced them, hands in my pockets. Authority, I repeated as if testing the word. You think you can overrule federal law with a neighborhood committee? Don't be dramatic, Tom said stiffly. We're simply enforcing the covenant you signed when you moved here. I nodded, as though considering their point, even though my mind was already 10 moves ahead. Interesting. Because if you're going to fine me for owning a government-issued vehicle used for official duties, then you're essentially obstructing federal operations, which, if I remember correctly, can carry some pretty hefty penalties. Sandra's clipboard wavered slightly. Karen scoffed. You're bluffing. No one is going to care about your little ranger job. This is bigger than you. This is about property values. The absurdity nearly made me laugh, but I held it in. Instead, I said, tell you what. Go ahead and issue your fines. Make it official. Send it in writing. That way, when I forward it to my district office, they'll have concrete evidence of the HOA interfering with federal business. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Tom's face. Sandra shifted uncomfortably. Karen, though, doubled down. We're not scared of your threats. My brother-in-law is a lawyer. He'll tear you apart. I gave a small shrug, climbed into the Jeep, and started the engine. Then I guess we'll see who wins. Just remember, you started this. I drove off, but not before catching sight of Karen's face in the rearview mirror. She looked like a general rallying her troops after a lost battle, determined to plan a counterstrike. 2 days later, it came. A notice appeared taped to my front door in bright red letters. Immediate action required. It demanded I remove the Jeep within 72 hours or face escalating fines, liens, and legal action. The signature at the bottom. Karen, HOA President. She had promoted herself. I took the notice down, folded it neatly, and placed it in my work binder. Documentation was everything. Then I picked up the phone and called a contact at the federal solicitor's office, the legal branch of my agency. I explained the situation, read the notice verbatim, and waited. The lawyer on the other end chuckled. Sounds like your HOA president just attempted to supersede federal regulations. Send us a copy. We'll handle it. I knew better than to expect immediate fireworks. Legal machinery moves slowly, grinding like an old millstone. But the seed was planted. Karen had just thrown herself into a game she didn't even understand. Meanwhile, the neighborhood tension was building like a pressure cooker. People started whispering to me when they caught me outside. What's going on with Karen? Did she really try to get the cops to arrest you? Is it true you're some kind of agent? I played it cool, never confirming, never denying, always letting curiosity do the work. Karen, on the other hand, was spinning wild stories. I overheard her at the mailbox telling Sandra that I was an unstable loner who faked a badge he bought online. She told Tom that I was hoarding weapons in the Jeep and plotting to overthrow the HOA. The irony was almost too delicious. She thought painting me as dangerous would scare the neighbors into siding with her. Instead, it made them cautious toward her. Because if even half her accusations were true, then poking me might be a bad idea. And if they weren't true, then she was just a liar on a power trip. Either way, she was losing credibility. But Karen had one more trick up her sleeve. On the third night after the notice, I came home from a long patrol to find the Jeep's tires deflated. Not slashed, not punctured, just carefully, methodically deflated. A petty move, but a telling one. Someone had crept onto my driveway in the dark and tried to immobilize my vehicle. I crouched beside the Jeep, running my fingers over the valve stems. Whoever did it thought they were clever, but they hadn't counted on the Jeep being equipped for exactly this kind of nonsense. I pulled out the portable compressor from the trunk and reinflated the tires in minute. But I didn't stop there. From my bag, I retrieved a set of motion-triggered trail cameras, gear I usually used for monitoring wildlife. I mounted them discreetly around the perimeter of my yard, angled perfectly at the Jeep, the driveway, and the street. Karen wanted a war? She was about to be on candid camera. The next morning, I reviewed the footage over coffee. Sure enough, there she was. Karen, in her robe and slippers at 2 in the morning, crouching by the Jeep with a smug little grin as she unscrewed the valve caps. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I couldn't help but laugh. She had no idea that her little stunt was now federal evidence. Tampering with government property, even something as small as deflating tires, was a crime with teeth. The question was, how much rope did I want to give her before letting her hang herself with it? That day, Karen strutted around the cul-de-sac like she'd won. She even stopped by my driveway, pretending concern. "Oh dear, did your tires go flat? Must be a sign from the universe. Maybe it's time to let go of that thing." By the time Friday rolled around, the whole cul-de-sac was buzzing like a beehive. Neighbors weren't mowing their lawns or chatting about weather. They were whispering about me and Karen. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when I walked by, in the sideways glances I caught through half-open blinds. Karen, of course, was fueling the fire. She strutted from house to house with her binder of HOA rules tucked under her arm, whispering her own version of the story. That I was a fraud, a thug, maybe even some kind of militia wannabe. The irony was that her campaign to discredit me was doing the opposite. People were wary of her. She had always been bossy, but now she sounded paranoid, unstable. You could see it in the way Tom and Sandra, her bored lackeys, started keeping their distance when she got too loud. I didn't need to intervene. She was digging her own grave with every rant. But the real storm hit when my phone rang that afternoon. The caller ID displayed a number I recognized instantly, Federal Field Office. "This is Ranger Holt," I answered. A calm voice came through. "Agent Rivera, U.S. Department of the Interior. I've reviewed the complaint you forwarded, along with the video footage. I'll be in your area tomorrow morning to follow up. We take tampering with federal property seriously. Be prepared to walk me through everything." I thanked him and hung up, feeling that quiet surge of satisfaction you only get when you know the pieces are falling exactly where they should. The next morning, Rivera arrived. Mid-40s, clean-cut, suit instead of uniform, the kind of guy who looked like he could blend into a coffee shop one moment and a courtroom the next. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and that unshakable calm you only see in people who've handled chaos before. We sat on my porch, coffee mugs in hand, while I laid out the timeline. The confrontation, the notice taped to my door, the deflated tires, the footage of Karen in action. Rivera took notes, asked sharp questions, and nodded thoughtfully. "Classic misuse of HOA authority," he said finally. "And tampering with your Jeep puts this squarely under our jurisdiction. She's escalated beyond a civil nuisance. At this point, it's potential criminal mischief against federal property." I couldn't help the grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. "You're saying she's in real trouble?" "I'm saying," Rivera replied, "if she keeps escalating, she's about to learn what happens when neighborhood drama crosses into federal territory. But here's the thing, we don't want to scare her off too early. The stronger the pattern, the stronger the case." I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "You mean let her keep digging?" Rivera's eyes glinted. "Exactly. People like her can't resist overplaying their hand. All we have to do is wait." As if the universe was on cue, Karen appeared across the street, dragging a trash can toward the curb. She spotted us instantly. Her eyes narrowed, her pace quickened. Within seconds she was marching across my lawn, trash can abandoned, voice rising. "What's this? Who's this? What are you plotting now?" She jabbed a finger at Rivera, who didn't even flinch. "Are you one of his friends from his so-called job? This is harassment. You're trespassing." Rivera stood smoothly, flashing a badge so quickly and decisively that even Karen's brain registered what it meant. "Agent Rivera, Department of the Interior. I'm here on official business." Karen's face drained of color, then flushed scarlet in the span of 3 seconds. You can't be serious. You're actually entertaining his nonsense." Rivera's tone was calm, professional. Ma'am, I'll advise you to be careful with your words. We've received credible evidence of tampering with federal property. Her jaw dropped. Federal property? It's a Jeep. A rusty, ugly Jeep. Government-issued equipment, Rivera corrected firmly. Interfering with it is a federal offense. For a moment, Karen just gaped, caught between disbelief and panic. Then her fury reignited. You think you can intimidate me? You think I'm scared of your badges? I know my rights. This is a community matter, and the HOA has final say. Rivera and I exchanged a glance, half amusement, half disbelief. She had no idea how absurd she sounded. Rivera closed his notebook. Thank you for your time, ma'am. You may be hearing from our office soon. Karen sputtered as he walked back to his car, but the damage was done. She had just openly dismissed a federal agent on record, right in front of me and half the neighbors who were peeking from their windows. But Karen wasn't finished. Oh no. That evening, just as the sun dipped low and the cul-de-sac bathed in golden light, she made her next move. A U-Haul truck pulled up in front of my driveway. I watched, arms crossed, as two hired workers hopped out. Karen strutted behind them, clipboard in hand, grinning like a queen delivering justice. Boys, she called, this is the one. Tow it away. The Jeep. Right now. The workers hesitated, glancing between her and me. I didn't move. Do you have a legal order? I asked flatly. Karen waved her clipboard. The HOA voted unanimously. This vehicle is being impounded for community safety. The workers looked uneasy. One scratched his head. Ma'am, we usually need the owner's consent or a court order. You have my consent. Karen barked. I'm the president of the HOA. That's all the authority you need. I stepped forward, voice calm but razor-sharp. Touch that Jeep and you'll be committing a federal crime. It's government-issued. You'll be held personally liable. The workers froze, their eyes darting to the Jeep, then back to me. You could see the calculations running through their heads. $200 cash from Karen wasn't worth the risk of federal charges. Sorry, lady, one muttered, climbing back into the truck. We're not getting involved. Karen shrieked, running after them as they pulled away. Cowards! Traitors! I'll sue all of you! The sound echoed through the cul-de-sac. Neighbors stepped outside now, openly watching. Some were filming. Karen turned in circles, screaming about conspiracies, betrayal, and corrupt federal agent. Her face was red, her hair wild, her voice cracking. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. When she finally stomped back to her house, I knew this was the tipping point. She'd crossed into full-blown obsession. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a symbol of her failure to control me. And she would not rest until she either destroyed it, or destroyed herself trying. That night, Rivera called. We've seen enough. The attempted removal is the nail in the coffin. We're moving forward. But keep your cameras up. If she tries one more stunt, it only makes our job easier. I walked out to the Jeep under the stars, running a hand along the hood. The machine had seen me through snowstorms, floods, and rescue missions. But now it was at the center of a neighborhood war more absurd than anything the wilderness could throw at me. Karen thought she was about to win. She didn't know she was already trapped in her own game. And when the hammer dropped, it would fall harder than she could ever imagine. By the following week, the neighborhood no longer felt like a quiet cul-de-sac. It felt like a stage, and every porch, every window, every driveway was a seat in the audience. Everyone knew something was happening between me and Karen. They just didn't know how close we were to the grand finale. Karen, of course, had doubled down. She plastered flyers across mailboxes claiming the HOA had the right to impound dangerous vehicles. She held impromptu board meetings in her front yard, barking orders at Tom and Sandra, who looked less like loyal officers and more like prisoners of war. And she stopped pretending to be subtle. She would stand on her porch, hands on hips, glaring at my Jeep like it was an enemy soldier encamped on her territory. The whispers reached me every day. One neighbor admitted Karen had tried to recruit them, promising protection from my federal intimidation. Another confessed she was threatening to fine people who didn't support her campaign. The HOA had always been a nuisance, but now it was unraveling into something bordering on cultish. Agent Rivera kept in close contact, his calm voice a steady counterpoint to the circus. He told me to stay patient, keep documenting everything, and above all, not take the bait. She wants you to explode, he reminded me. Don't. Let her show everyone who she really is. The opportunity came sooner than either of us expected. On Wednesday night, just past midnight, my trail cameras caught movement. Not Karen this time. Two young men, hoodies pulled low, sneaking into my driveway. They carried tools. A crowbar, a hammer, and what looked like a siphon pump. I didn't move right away. I watched from my upstairs window, phone in hand, recording silently as they circled the Jeep. One of them whispered, "This is the one. She said we just have to make it undrivable." There it was. They went to work, trying to jimmy open the door. They weren't professionals, just desperate amateurs. Within minutes, the cul-de-sac echoed with the sound of metal clanging against reinforced steel. The Jeep didn't budge. That was my cue. I stepped outside, calm as a shadow, flashlight in one hand and badge in the other. "Evening, gentlemen," I said evenly, the beams snapping across their faces. "Mind telling me what you're doing with federal property?" They froze, deer in headlights. One dropped the crowbar with a loud clatter. "You've got about 10 seconds before this becomes a very long night for both of you," I continued. "So start talking. Who sent you?" The taller one cracked first. "Karen. It was Karen. She said she'd pay us to take care of it." The shorter one hissed, "Shut up, man," but the damage was done. I didn't need them to confess twice. I kept the flashlight steady, dialed Rivera, and within 15 minutes a county sheriff's cruiser rolled up. The boys were cuffed, loaded into the back seat, and Karen's name was now written into the official incident report. By morning, the news had spread like wildfire. Neighbors weren't whispering anymore. They were openly talking. Sandra's husband told me at the mailbox that even she was considering stepping down from the board. Tom had been spotted sneaking into his garage with his golf cart, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Karen's power was cracking piece by piece. But she wasn't finished. Not even close. That evening, she staged what can only be described as a meltdown in 3 acts. Act 1. She marched door to door, screaming about conspiracies. According to her, I had planted the boys myself to frame her. She told anyone who would listen that I was running a federal sting operation on innocent homeowners. The irony was thick. She was closer to the truth than she realized, but the way she said it made her sound completely unhinged. Act 2. She parked herself in the middle of the cul-de-sac with a megaphone. Yes, a megaphone. She shouted about her rights as HOA president, about illegal government overreach, and about how my Jeep was a weapon of intimidation. Kids laughed. Adults recorded. Her voice cracked halfway through, but she didn't stop. Act 3, she called 911. Again. Only this time, she didn't report me. She reported Agent Rivera. I know this because I heard it firsthand. My phone buzzed with a call from Rivera, who sounded both exasperated and amused. She just tried to report me to local PD for impersonating a federal agent. They verified me in about 10 seconds flat. The sergeant said she was screaming into the phone about black helicopters. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so sad. Karen wasn't just losing control, she was unraveling in front of everyone. The next day, Rivera showed up again, this time with a second agent and an official vehicle. They parked right in front of Karen's house, stepped out in full view of the neighborhood, and knocked on her door. Karen appeared on the porch, disheveled but defiant. "You can't intimidate me. This is harassment. You're all in on it." Rivera's voice carried across the street, firm and professional. "Ma'am, we're here to advise you that your actions are under investigation. We have video evidence, eyewitness testimony, and documented harassment. You are advised to cease all interference with federal property and federal employees immediately. The words, federal investigation, rippled through the cul-de-sac like a shockwave. Neighbors stepped outside, phones raised, recording every second. Karen's face contorted, torn between rage and terror. She opened her mouth to scream, but for the first time, no sound came out. Rivera handed her a formal notice and walked away, leaving her frozen on the porch. It was the closest thing to a checkmate I'd ever seen in real life. But even as she stood there, clutching the paper with shaking hands, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't done. Not yet. Karen was too proud, too stubborn, too obsessed to surrender quietly. And sure enough, that night around 2 a.m., my cameras lit up again. Karen herself this time, stumbling across my lawn in a trench coat, carrying what looked like a can of spray paint. She reached the Jeep, shook the can, and started scrawling giant red letters across the side. Thief. Fraud. Liar. I didn't move right away. I let her finish the first word before stepping outside, voice cutting through the night like a blade. You know, Karen, vandalism carries an even steeper penalty when it's against federal property. She froze, the can hissing in her hand. Her eyes went wide, caught in the glare of my flashlight. You think you're clever, she hissed, her voice trembling. But you don't belong here. You never belonged here. I'll make sure everyone sees what you really are. I raised my phone, showing her the live feed of herself painting the Jeep. Everyone already sees it, Karen. That's the problem. For a heartbeat, she just stood there, spray can dangling uselessly. Then she dropped it and bolted across the lawn, disappearing into her house like a fugitive. By dawn, Rivera had the footage. That's it, he said flatly over the phone. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. She's officially escalated to federal vandalism charges. We're moving forward. The neighborhood woke to find the Jeep partially covered in red letters and Karen's reputation in absolute ruins. Word spread fast. Neighbors weren't whispering anymore. They were openly laughing. Kids pointed at the streaks of paint and joked about Karen's midnight art project. She had gone from feared HOA tyrant to the neighborhood punchline overnight. The morning after Karen's midnight graffiti spree, the cul-de-sac felt different. Not calmer, tenser like the air before a thunderstorm. People weren't hiding behind curtains anymore. They were out in their driveways, pretending to sweep or water plants, but really waiting to see what Karen would do next. I scrubbed the Jeep carefully, leaving a faint trace of the red spray paint untouched on the passenger side door. Evidence. Rivera had told me not to erase everything. Every mark she leaves is another nail in the coffin, he'd said. And he was right. Karen, however, didn't emerge that morning. Her blinds stayed shut. The woman who once marched across lawns and shouted into megaphones was now barricaded in her house. But I knew that didn't mean surrender. With people like Karen, silence isn't peace, it's plotting. By noon, my hunch proved right. A convoy of SUVs rolled into the cul-de-sac. Not federal vehicles this time, private security. 3 men in black polo shirts with radios on their belts climbed out, followed by Karen herself, dressed in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, clutching a thick binder. She looked like she'd just been appointed to Congress. She strode toward my driveway, heels clicking like gunshot. This ends today, she announced loudly, her voice echoing off the houses. The HOA has voted for immediate seizure of this vehicle. These men are here to enforce community law. The neighbors gathered, whispering, phones raised. This was better than television. I crossed my arms. Private security? Really, Karen? They're licensed professionals, she snapped. Unlike you. You've been impersonating law enforcement and terrorizing this neighborhood. But today, order will be restored. The 3 guards shifted uneasily. One of them glanced at the Jeep. Ma'am, this looks like a government-issued vehicle. Karen cut him off. Ignore him. He lies. He fakes credentials. This is just a toy he's using to intimidate us. Remove it, or you don't get paid. I took one slow step forward, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice the tension. Gentlemen, listen carefully. That Jeep is federal property. If you touch it, you won't just lose your jobs, you'll be facing federal charges. I strongly suggest you walk away right now. The tallest guard cleared his throat. Ma'am, without a court order, we can't. Karen exploded. Court order? HOA authority is higher than any court order. Do you want me to fine you? Do you want me to sue? The absurdity hung in the air like smoke. Neighbors laughed openly now. One of the guards muttered something under his breath, and within seconds, the men climbed back into their SUVs. Engines roared, tires squealed, and they were gone. Karen stood frozen in the street, binder clutched to her chest, watching her hired muscle abandon her. The humiliation was nuclear. You just scared off my security, she hissed at me. You think you've won? You haven't. I'll go higher. I'll call state police, the governor, the president if I have to. Please do, I said, smiling thinly. They'll all tell you the same thing. You're in way over your head. She stomped back to her house, slamming the door so hard a potted plant toppled off her porch. That evening, Rivera returned. This time, he didn't come alone. 2 marked federal vehicles parked in the cul-de-sac, lights flashing. Agents in suits stepped out, carrying folders. The neighborhood gathered in a semicircle, silent now, watching history unfold. Rivera knocked on Karen's door. Ma'am, this is Agent Rivera with the Department of the Interior. You are officially under investigation for harassment, vandalism of federal property, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and misuse of HOA authority. You are advised to come with us for questioning. The door creaked open. Karen appeared, face pale, eyes wild. This is harassment, she screamed. You can't do this to me. I am the president of this community. You don't understand who I am. Rivera didn't flinch. Ma'am, that's exactly the problem. You don't understand who we are. For a moment she just stood there, shaking. Then she bolted, past the agents, across her lawn, binder flapping in her hands like a broken wing. She made it 10 feet before 2 agents intercepted her, gently but firmly restraining her arms. The neighbors gasped. Some filmed. Some clapped. One kid shouted, "Bye, Karen!" She shrieked, twisting against the agent's grip. You can't arrest me. I make the rules. This is my neighborhood. My neighborhood. But her voice cracked, and the words dissolved into sobs. They walked her to the vehicle, placed her inside, and shut the door. The flashing lights painted her silhouette against the window as the convoy pulled away. Silence lingered after they left, broken only by the sound of cicadas buzzing in the trees. Then, slowly, the neighbors turned toward me. It wasn't applause or cheers. It was something quieter, heavier. A nod of respect, relief, gratitude. For months, maybe years, they'd all lived under Karen's thumb. And now, for the first time, they could breathe. Tom approached me cautiously, hands shoved in his pockets. Guess that means I'm the new acting president, he muttered. But don't worry, I'll keep things quiet. No more of whatever that was. I raised an eyebrow. Good. Because if anyone else tries to mess with the Jeep, I'll be less patient next time. He chuckled nervously and walked away. In the days that followed, the cul-de-sac transformed. Kids played freely in the street. Neighbors lingered on porches, talking and laughing. The HOA, once a weapon in Karen's hands, became little more than a piece of paper no one cared about. Sandra resigned. Tom stepped down a week later. The board dissolved, quietly and without fanfare. Karen, meanwhile, vanished from the neighborhood. Word spread that she'd been charged with misdemeanor vandalism and given a hefty fine. She avoided jail, but the humiliation was worse than any sentence. Her house went up for sale within a month. No one ever saw her again. As for me, I kept the Jeep, of course. Every time I climbed into it, I remembered the absurdity of it all, how a single entitled neighbor thought she could seize what wasn't hers, and how her obsession led to her downfall. Sometimes, when I drove past the empty house that once belonged to her, I imagined her voice echoing in the silence. "You don't understand who I am." The truth was, we all understood. She was just Karen. And in the end, that wasn't enough. The Jeep gleamed in the sunlight as I pulled out of the cul-de-sac one last time, heading for a patrol deep in the backcountry. Out there, the fights were with storms, wildlife, and wilderness. Out there, the only rules that mattered were written by nature itself. And after surviving Karen, those rules felt simple.